thinking a lot recently about why I think spiritual practice is important, and especially about why I think it's universally important, even though I personally don't have a belief in a deity or divinity that requires our worship of them in any way. So spiritual practice, to my mind, is very much a personal choice. That being said, if I was pushed to give an answer on whether or not there is an innate spiritual or religious urge in every human, if I had to give a yes or no answer to that, I would probably veer towards yes. I spent quite a lot of time doing my master's and PhD in religious studies trying to come up with an answer to that. I think it's a very complex existential philosophical question that probably has no solid answer, and we can only give tentative answers from our own experience and potential answers. But overall, I do believe that there is probably some form of spiritual practice that will benefit almost everybody. Almost anyone can stumble during their lives upon a particular form of practice, a particular way of bringing themselves into that zone that is going to nurture them, that is going to bring value and meaning to their life. I have focused a lot on self-made practice, both in my own journey, in my own spiritual journey, and also in the content that I've created on the channel, and the videos that I've made, in blog posts that I have written. And that has always been my special interest, I suppose, because it has been the journey that I have chosen to take. I have chosen to go down a slightly unbeaten path and figure out what it is that I want to do at the altar and what the altar is going to look like for me, rather than following anyone else's instructions. But I really do think that everything that I understand a self-made spirituality to do for you absolutely applies to all other forms of spirituality and religion, so long as they actually do perform the same functions for you in your life, in your mind, in your relationship to divinity. As long as those pre-made structures of spirituality and religion, as long as they're working for you, as long as they're making sense, as long as they feel like a good fit. When it comes to the hard questions about the nature of divinity, the nature of cosmos, is there some kind of personal God? When it comes to all of that, I'm largely agnostic. It works for me to address divinity. It works for me to address cosmos as though it can hear me, as though there is something out there, as though it is personal in some way and can be interacted with. So when it comes to figuring out why you think a spiritual practice is important for you, or what the point of it actually is for you, you can definitely lean quite hard into that angle of, well, if there is some form of divinity out there, I would like to be attempting to communicate with it. I would like to be attempting to connect with it, to explore it, to revere it, to acknowledge it. I think that's a perfectly good reason to have a spiritual practice, and I think that does it has a lot of weight to it, and it can help ground a practice. And I definitely like to keep a very strong mystical element in my practice. Whenever I feel that waning, whenever I feel like my practice is becoming very literal and is just aiming to be totally earth-centric and focused on the cycles of the year and the seasons and so on, I think that's totally valid, and for some people that is what they need their practice to be. For some people that is going to be enough. Enough sounds a bit dismissive, actually, saying that's enough, because for some people that is the whole animal. But for me personally, I find that if my practice becomes overly focused on that and the mysticism starts to wane, I start to lose that sense of value and meaning behind my practice. It starts to feel a little bit pointless to me, because for me that sense of exploration is important. It is what drew me into it in the first place, and it is what continues to bolster me and keep me moving along that path. It keeps me coming back to the altar over and over again. That sense of curiosity and wonder and a willingness to be open to the possibility that I will at any moment have an experience that I have not had before, have an insight that would never have occurred to me before, and maybe even change my perspective, change my worldview a little bit based on something that happens at the altar, that I bring about at the altar. Overall, through saying all of that, I'm moving towards what I think is maybe the most universal point behind a spiritual practice, and that is to simultaneously express and explore both our own selves and our own minds and our experience, our subjectivity, our experience of the world, and through that to explore cosmos, to explore existence, to explore what it is that we think is out there and what could be out there based on our own subjectivity, because at the end of the day, our subjectivity is all that we have to go on. And this, I think, is what is somewhat unique to spirituality, or at least I think that many people will find that they can dig into that part of their lives, that they can explore and express things through spiritual practice in a way that has not been possible for them through any other avenues in their lives, in a slightly new way. I do think that things like artistic expression of any kind is very akin to spiritual expression, and it can actually perform a lot of the same function for people. For me personally anyway, I know that when I sit down to write fiction, to write a song, even just to play music, I know that I'm tapping into something very similar. I'm attempting to do something very similar to what I'm doing at the altar. When I write a song, I'm attempting to express and enshrine a specific feeling and idea that I am embodying at that moment in time. But through that process, I think it evolves. Things evolve and shift, and I get a new perspective on the situation that I'm in, on the feelings that I'm having. It is exploratory. It's not just a simple process of mirroring what I'm feeling. If I wanted to do that, I probably would just journal and just describe what I'm feeling. But I think when we write a song or create something artistic, creative in some way, usually we are seeking to also alchemize that feeling, to transform it slightly, to turn it into something that is a little bit transpersonal, that reaches out into the world a little more and connects our own personal individual experience with something greater. And that feeling exactly there is precisely what it is that I am seeking to do with my spiritual practice. And I think at the end of the day, most people within an alternative spiritual community, I think especially people who have their own self-made practices, I think that is what we are generally trying to do. And I personally think that this is the value, this is what is valuable about a spiritual practice. It is such a unique and powerful way to express, embody and enshrine a particular type of feeling that we have about the world, a hope that we have about how things operate, a sensation, a feeling, sometimes it's a very fleeting glimpse into an alternative perspective on reality that we might have while walking through some sunlit trees, or by watching the sun play on a lake, by watching snow fall quietly on a still winter's morning. There are so many different places that we can have these moments, these transpersonal moments that feel as though something more needs to be made of them. And for some of us, we will turn to artistic expression to like I say, enshrine and express and explore those feelings. But for other people, they will feel called to attempt to reconstruct and find once more that feeling through a spiritual practice. And like I say, I think that my own experience of doing that has led me to creating my own spiritual practice. And I think that sometimes it's easier to start from scratch and to just come up with your own personal practice that helps you to do that. And this is something I've talked about a lot. You probably, if you're watching this video, you probably have heard me talk before about my series Paving Your Own Path. It's a video series that is a playlist on this channel, and there's also an edited audio version with a workbook that you can get through signing up to my newsletter. And I'm going to be reworking that again in the future. I've made that resource, and there are plenty of other very talented individuals here on YouTube and in the community at large who also focus on self-made practice. Kellyanne Maddox is a prime example. But I really do think that this same process is likely to be occurring through all sorts of pre-made, pre-existing traditions. I think that sometimes inserting our experiences into a pre-made structure, it doesn't take away from that process at all, I don't think. I think we can turn up to altar. I think we can, for example, we can be casting a circle in the exact tradition that perhaps your coven has for however many generations, or maybe it's something that you found in a book that really resonates with you and you have been doing this for decades, or maybe not, maybe you've just picked it up now, but it works for you, it gets you into an altered state of consciousness. It makes you feel connected with something greater than you. And I absolutely think that those practices can be just as alchemizing. I think that every time we enter into sacred space, whether it is through a practice that we ourselves have written and constructed over time and pieced together, or whether it is through following along and through someone else's words and actions and something that has been passed down, I think either way, the place that we're trying to get to is a place of real vulnerability and intimacy. I think what we are often trying to construct through these practices, and not just through these alternative spiritual practices, but I would imagine through other major religious traditions as well, I think what we are trying to enter into is a state of vulnerability and intimacy with something other than human, something transformative and transpersonal, something that feels a little bit outside of ourselves, greater than ourselves, bigger than ourselves. It's similar to that feeling that we sometimes have when we have a very intimate conversation with a friend or somebody, maybe somebody that we've just met or we're just getting to know. You know, those moments where you feel as though you've shared something of significance with another person, whether it's through words or an experience, or however many different senses that you can be sharing a moment with another person. I think we are often looking for that feeling. But we're looking to have it between ourselves and divinity, between ourselves and the universe, or whatever it is that we imagine is out there for us to connect to and tap into. But at the heart of the effort to create a sense of connection, I think, is an instinct to know ourselves as well. Because I don't think that we can truly open ourselves up to another person or to the universe without opening ourselves up to ourselves. I think that comes as part of the process, and this is often why it can be very difficult and very painful for us to create and nurture very close bonds with other people when we ourselves are hurting, are in pain, are working through trauma or whatever. I do think that at the heart of this process is this desire and need to look within and to explore and express what it is that we are feeling internally, and to express that through really powerful symbols, through our actions at the altar in sacred space, through the items on our altar, through candles, through prayer. We're working always with these very deep and resonant symbols that are very, very powerful to us individually. And again, this is what we're seeking to access, and often if people are working within existing traditions and they're happy with those religious traditions, it's because the symbols of that tradition have spoken to them. The pictures, the images, the actual, physical symbols like the pentagram and the cross, the prayers, the most commonplace prayers, all of that just makes sense. It clicks with their psyche. And those of us who go down the self-made path, it's often because that particular combination of symbols in whatever religions that we have been exposed to just don't quite click for us. So we're expressing things that are going on within us, and at the same time we're building something, we're exploring, we are testing the waters. We're I think by putting our subjectivity out into the world and onto the altar and into our actions, I think we're walking ourselves through what it feels like to be alive and what we believe is happening through our existence on this planet, in this life. And I think it's essentially, when it comes down to it, I think that it's like embodied philosophy or embodied theology. By going through this process, by enacting all of this stuff, at the end of the day we feel like we are really connecting to our fundamental understanding of what cosmos is, and we are exploring that and finding out new things and feeling new things and so on. So thanks so much for watching this video. If you're new to the channel, please do subscribe if you like this video, if you want to see more from me, and don't forget to like the video and to comment down below and let me know your own thoughts and any questions that you might have. So yeah, thanks a million for watching, and I'll be talking to you again soon.